So good afternoon, OIS audience. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today and to be part of this incredible event hosted by OIS in recognition of the significant contributions that Israel is bringing to ophthalmic innovation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob Rothman. I am a glaucoma specialist by training. I am also the co-founder and managing director of InFocus Capital Partners, which is an ophthalmic-focused venture capital fund based in the United States, where we invest solely in ophthalmic technology. We have a 13 asset portfolio, and we are just in the process of winding down the investment period of Fund 1. We have active investments in Israel, and we often look to Israeli companies for opportunities, and we have spoken with many of the amazing companies that are presented here today. I am fortunate enough to be speaking with some very unique and diverse people on our panel today, with the hopes of enlightening the audience and the presenting companies as to the interaction that they may have with investors and strategic partnerships. And with that as a backdrop, I'm going to introduce our panel. First and foremost, we have Dr. Begoña Carreño. She is the Global Business Development and Licensing Head of Ophthalmology at Novartis. Welcome, Begoña. We have Colin Francoux, who is the Managing Director of TEA Open Innovation. We also have Yaakov Mishlin, who is the CEO of BioLight Life Sciences. And for those of you who don't know them, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, but BioLight is a public investment company, very similar, I guess, to what we do, but on a much larger scale. And finally, Dr. Prabhu Velasamy, who is the New Venture and Transactions Lead for Vision and Ophthalmology at J&J's London Innovation Center. And hopefully everybody can give a little bit of a brief background as to who they are and what they do. I think it's important for the audience to have that. So Begoña, you can go first. Just maybe introduce yourself to the audience if you can.
Sure, happy to. So as you rightly said, Rob, it's a privilege to be here at the OIS. It's always nice to be surrounded by such colleagues. So thanks very much for the invitation. A bit about myself. I've been at Novartis for 17 years, so you can call me a Novartian by now. Most of them in the business development and licensing group. So as the title might imply, my job responsibility is basically to lead any search, scouting, and negotiation, alliance management, or out-licensing in the ophthalmology space for Novartis Pharma.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to have you here. Colin.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks to the OIS for giving me the opportunity to share this panel. So for those of you who are not familiar with TEA, we are a European company specializing in ophthalmology. So pharma company. We are one of the biggest pharma ophthalmology players in Europe. And as the managing director of TEA Open Innovation, my goal and the goal of my team is to look at new projects and development in the ophthalmic field, evaluate them, and set up partnerships. So we're looking for many pharma projects that are anywhere between individual proof of concept and phase 2, and also some medical devices.
Just for clarification, Colin, is TEA Open Innovation part of TEA directly, or is it a separate entity?
Actually, it's a separate entity. It's a sister company, but both companies belong to the same holding structure. Okay,
great. Thank you. Prabhu, how about you next?
Hi there. As others have said, it's a real pleasure to be here. So thank you for the invite. My name is Prabhu Velasamy. I'm a former practicing ophthalmologist. I work at J&J's London Innovation Center. And in my role, I focus on early stage partnerships across vision. We call it vision, but it covers a number of different areas. It includes our surgical devices business. It includes our contact lens business, and it includes our retinal pharma business, which is within Janssen. And we have an ambition for 50% of our pipeline to be derived externally. So external partnerships is a really important part of our work.
That's great. We're going to get back to that later as a question for everybody, but thank you for that. And finally, Yaakov, you're the hometown guy, so you get to go last.
Thank you. And so BioLight is actually the only and the leading investor in Israel focusing solely on ophthalmology. We currently have 9 companies in our portfolio. In my background, I used to manage the largest innovation hub in the academic innovation hub in Israel. Then I managed the US revenue-oriented company listed on the NASDAQ. And this brings me to what we are trying to do in BioLight. We are exactly in the spot of trying to bridge the bridge between the exciting innovation that we have in Israel and to bridge between the innovation in Israel and prepare them to be relevant for you as a strategic corporation. So we see BioLight as a great opportunity to be the bridge, taking relatively early or post-seed innovation and preparing it to get to the market with the strategic alliances. So this is what we have currently in the portfolio, and this is what we are looking to get from conferences like OIS and others.
That's great. Thank you for the introduction. So again, just let me highlight that I think it's a very unique panel that we have here because we have an investment entity in BioLight, and we have a corporate venture arm to some degree, I guess, in TEA, Open Innovation, and what Prabhu's doing with the London Innovation Center. And then we have strategic partnership at Novartis. And I think that it's a very unique group to have here. And I think that the questions that we're going to go through are going to be enlightening for not only the companies that presented today, but also for investors as to how you interact with early opportunities, because there should be 4 different perspectives here. And I'm hoping that we can sort of discuss those differences in perspective in enough detail to give some guidance to the people who will be listening to this. So the first question, and I think the one that's most relevant considering the title of this showcase, is Industry Insights on Partnering and Collaboration, which probably could be loosely translated into a subtitle as how can these companies get money, right? Which is how can they get money to move forward? The first question first, I guess, for Begonia is, how early are you willing to interact with companies like the ones that presented today? And what is the process for those companies having access to you?
Sure. So Novartis is uniquely structured in that sense in industry that we have our Novartis Institute for Biomedical Research, that they have their own BD&L group, and they look as early as university collaborations. And that spans across into proof of concept. And then the Novartis Pharma BD team, which is where I'm in, looks after post-POC opportunities. And any peri-POC opportunity, we lead together. But we're always in complete collaboration on both teams, right? So we cover the span of very, very early to late stage partnerships.
And how involved are you and how involved is your group with regard to the strategy, for who's going to receive those potential early collaborations? Because those are very distinct groups, the BD and licensing, obviously at a commercial stage, and the innovations group, looking at preclinical data potentially. Where does the strategy come from?
Sure. So we have strategy reviews once per year. And it includes people from research and clinical and marketing and market access, but BD&L is intimate part of this disease area strategy, if you like. And so we kind of have a balancing act of what is it that our needs are versus what's out there. And we kind of bring it together and do that presentation once and twice to management per year to make sure that we've not missed anything within the realm of things that we're looking at. And when there are opportunities that are opportunistic, forgive the pun, we always know whether we can quickly go after them or there's going to be some internal alignment needed. But for me, strategy is the first pole, if you like, where we feed all the information of what the needs are and what we're seeing out there.
Understand. So, Prabhu, how does that work for you at J&J? Is that a similar structure or is it different?
I think the general theme of close collaboration is definitely there. So one of the challenges, I think, for anyone who's an external innovator is to figure out who within that organization to speak to. It's a US headquartered company. Do I go to the US? Do I go to someone in my local market? Do I go to the London Innovation Center? How early is too early? Do I speak to business development? Do I speak to early innovation partnering? And it's challenging. And that was one of the reasons that Johnson & Johnson has gone down the innovation center route. So you shouldn't have to, as an external innovator, figure out who within the organization you speak to. You reach out to the innovation center and they will put you in touch with me. And I will then review the science in close collaboration with my colleagues within the business. And then we will make a decision on next steps from there. How early is too early, I think, was one of the questions. I think it's never too early, actually. There's a bit you have to balance off as an external innovator. Do I bring something that's not fully thought through, or do I wait until it's more formulated and then I'll have a better discussion? And this is a bit biased because I do work at Johnson & Johnson. I think generally, you can have a non-confidential discussion at any stage. And I think that there's value in speaking to a strategic early because they can give you feedback, they can course correct, or they can give you some advice if you're trying to figure out how to structure a study. So it saves you from going too far down a path that may actually hinder you later on down the line.
So anybody who presented here today can pretty much pick up the phone, call the London Innovation Center for J&J, say, I want to speak to Prabhu Velasamy, and you'll get back to them at some point. Is that the real message here that you want to hear from
yeah,
this
for ophthalmology,
company?
it definitely is. It may not be the answer you want. It may be actually it's not on strategy for us, but I think one of the frustrating bits of approaching large corporations is it goes off into a black hole and you never hear back. And one thing that we do commit to doing is giving you feedback on the reasons why we like the technology, or actually it's not for us for these reasons.
Right.
Yeah, Rob, if I may, I'd like to echo what Prabhu says. It's never too early. So please do come to us because, as Prabhu said, not only advice, but course correction on the data that a corporate would want to see. And then obviously the companies are free to choose whether they go down that route or not. And similarly to what Prabhu said, at Novartis, we are the same. We are committed to answer every single inquiry. So in anything to do with ophthalmology, even if it's early, please do send it to me and I'll make sure that it reaches my right colleague at NIBR if it's too early for us, or Novartis Venture Fund for that matter.
So I'm going to give Yakov the answer to go last again. So I like going to him last because I can tell you, at least from my own perception, that during the lifespan of InFocus, we've probably evaluated somewhere around 200, 220 companies so far in 3 years. And not one of them has felt like they were ready to go to a larger corporate strategic partner for early intervention and guidance. And we'll see if I'll get Yakov will agree with me or not. But before we get to that, Colin, Théa is a slightly different entity in that you focus solely on ophthalmology. And we actually share a common company to some degree that, and we know that company has, interacted with you at an early stage and they've had a very positive experience. So the question is, do you approach these collaborations in a similar way? Are you open to every opportunity? Is there a structure in place between Laboratoire Théa and your division, or how does it work with regard to how you filter out opportunities?
So what we say within the Open Innovation Group is that we're looking for projects that have in vivo proof of concept, so at least some animal data. That being said, I second Prabhu and Begonia here. Even we're really happy to speak to companies that are even at earlier stages, just to have a feeling of what they are. And it's always easier to step in further discussions if you already had a first contact some months or even years earlier. So that's for the stage, but we made a number of our deals on the preclinical stage. So yes, that's something that we are very happy to do. And then regarding the second question, so Thea Innovation and Laboratoire are two distinct companies. That being said, we are all in the same building, and we really work on a daily basis with the Thea experts. So basically what we're doing is that the Open Innovation team, so we have 12 people within the team, and the first evaluation is made here, but as soon as we go to the due diligence step, then a number of the Thea technical teams are involved. And to be honest, even at first contact, if the company has a very specific point that they need to get into more detail, or that we feel needs some really high degree of technicity, we'll just reach out to the Thea company again. They're just in the same building, so it's very easy for us. Well, I think that's one of the advantages of being a small company dedicated to ophthalmology too. We don't have as much money as others, although that is changing. But we want to remain agile and have always the right people available. That's great.
I'm looking forward to Jacob's answer in a second. I'll tell you from a personal perspective that I think that maybe our own self-directed mandate as a venture capital fund has been to try and take these proof of concept companies with preclinical information and get them to a point where the data is more appropriate for a larger strategic, and whether that's been for born out of a desire to limit the financial disruption of equity ownership, or whether it's because companies have felt like they could do it on their own, is very unique to individual companies. But I have often felt that the mandate of venture capital has been to try and promote companies to a different level before they come to you. Is that your perception, Jacob, or am I speaking uniquely here?
So I would like first to address what Begone and Prabhu mentioned, and actually to testify for what they said, that in my former career, I even had the opportunity to license technologies both to Novartis and J&J. And actually even Novartis took a drug all the way until they paid royalties to the Hebrew University for a leading drug for Alzheimer's. So it was a very good experience, and we collaborated with the Novartis team. And same, we tried a lot of projects with J&J. I think we are now collaborating also indirectly in BioLite with TIA. But, and this, here comes the but, like in many Israeli sentences, I think that the problem begins when if you license a technology to the giants, okay, in early stage, and they internalize the project, then it will go smoothly and probably it's very good for the product. And they also know how to make M&As of growth of companies that are already selling. This is relatively easy for them. The problem is, and I think in many of the presentations that we saw today in the conference, so these are companies that are past the stage of the early stage innovation, but they are not at the revenue stage yet. And this is the tricky spot, I think, also for the large corporations, because it falls in between the cracks. It's somewhere between the ventures, between the pharma, between the tech, between the businesses. So sometimes it's hard for the entrepreneurs to navigate, and it's good to hear that Prabhu and Begonia can be the contact persons. But again, we are talking about different stages in the life of the company, and we are talking about different areas. So many of the companies are not just drugs, so they are combination. Some of them print organs, some of them do home monitoring, some of them do diagnostic of the eye. So you have so many, and it's hard to find in these organizations where to apply. If you find the right champion in the organization, I think it's the best thing for the company. And even if you are in early stage or the preferred C stage, if you manage to get one of the big players that we have here in the panel involved in the company in any format, whether in the scientific advisory board, as investors, as potential licensees, I think it contributes a lot, especially to the Israeli entrepreneurs and the CEO of the startups. And one of the take-home messages, I think that for the Israeli CEOs that presented here, I think that the goal should be to find the right champion that fits exactly, and the champion in this organization where they think that their company solves a real problem that this company is interested in. Once you found the right champion, whether it's in the venture or in the company, I think it contributes a lot of value, and then good things can happen. And I truly hope that in the near future we will see many collaboration in ophthalmology space with the three companies participating.
Nothing would be better than having 9 out of 9 of your portfolio companies find a nice strategic partner.
Even if 2 of them will find, it will be achievement. I'm realistic.
Listen, I have 13 children in the game. They all need to be partnered with, so we'll make sure that happens. Thank you, everybody, for that. I think that that's some important information for people to hear, and I think that over time we will see more early stage companies reaching out directly to strategic partners and I think that, as Prabhu said, you may not get the answer that you want, but even if you can get some guidance or if you can get some useful information, I think it's important. And we all would love to know, I think, or have better access to what the strategic pathways are of the corporate partners. But obviously, that's not something that's shared readily. And I think companies are going to have to reach out to as many entities as they can for support. And it's a process, and that's what it means to have an early startup. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to spend a few minutes talking specifically about Israel. There is, as we've seen today, just in ophthalmology alone, there is an incredible amount of technology coming from Israel with regard to ophthalmic innovation. What is it that attracts you? Why is it that you, as a strategic partner, want to be here? So let's go back to Begonia first and see, how has Israel attracted you, and what are your plans for partnering here or for looking for opportunities here in the future?
I think one of the things that have impressed me about Israeli startups and biotechs that I've been in touch with is how interdisciplinary they're working, right? So you're not just working with somebody that's had an idea. You're working with people that have engineers on site, clinicians and preclinical scientists, and they've put ideas together that are very complex, but they have, instead of working with consultants, they're actually a team that can work seamlessly among themselves within the same company. And I think that's unique. I've never seen that before outside of Israel, the way that innovation can exist by using different disciplines within the same umbrella company. So that's something that really resonated with me. And conversations are ongoing, and for confidentiality reasons, I can't tell you who that is. But we're very impressed with the progress so far.
That's great. Colin, how about you?
Yeah, so to be transparent, we're completely agnostic about where the companies we're discussing with come from, of course. But that being said, I think that discussing with Israeli companies, two things are really interesting for us. One is the sheer number of companies and innovation that is coming from Israel compared to the size of the country, which is kind of crazy, especially on the medical device field. And to be honest, I have no reason. I don't know what the reason behind that. I'm sure Jacob can enlighten us on this point. But just the sheer number of innovation is really impressive. And the other point also is I think that there is a great interconnectivity between companies. We have seen, again, talked with several companies that were working on really different areas on the ophthalmic field, but they still has contact and were really able to cross-fertilize pretty efficiently, which is something that is not seen that much in other countries. Again, I have no idea what those specifics come from. Jacob, I'll be happy to hear more.
Well, Jacob's going to tell us in a minute. Prabhu, how about you? Any specific reasons why you're attracted to this geography?
Yeah, so Israel's a very important market, I think, for innovation for Johnson & Johnson. Our corporate venture capital group is headquartered there, JJDC. They recognize the importance of that market. I think there's a few reasons why Israel is probably a bit differentiated. The first is density. There's just a density of innovation there. It's not a big country. People tend to know each other. So when you talk about interdisciplinary ways of working, if there's a gap, you usually know someone who works in that space that can actually work and collaborate with you. You've got world-class institutes. You've got the Weizmann and many, many others. Another thing I think that's quite interesting to reflect on is the attitude and the approach of most of the PIs and the investigators. I generally tend to find that innovators from Israel are much more entrepreneurial right from an early stage. They're really thinking through, this is interesting science. How can this be commercially relevant? What is the bundle of things I need to put together to make this more compelling? And I guess the final things I think through it is the funding environment in Israel is very, very conducive. The government is very supportive to innovation in Israel, and there are some really interesting leverage mechanisms for funding for early stage startups within Israel, and the incubator setup there, I think, is extremely strong.
So Jacob, maybe you can elaborate on that, and maybe you can also talk a little bit about Invest in Israel, which is, the government-sponsored efforts to encourage investment in Israel, not just in ophthalmology, obviously, but maybe your interaction with them, and just to expand upon what our other panelists have already mentioned.
Great. So first, I have an interesting perspective working in an academia innovation hub and then in a revenue company. But now I am also a co-chairman of IATI, which is an umbrella organization of all the high-tech and biotech companies. So first of all, I really enjoy the fact that our participants already know that some of the advantages of Israel. And so it's good. But I would like to emphasize a few other things. If we are talking about biotech research, if you look at the Israeli academia, it's an unheard, I think, achievement that we have at least 2 or 3 of the main academic institutions in Israel in the top in the world in terms of patents per researcher. And this is especially if you compare the sizes of the R&D budget. So this is really the top of the world. And as Prabhu said, they are all accessible, all top researchers. So you have a lot of biotech innovation coming from the university. But in addition to this, and I think in the last, I would say, decade, in the last 10 years, what is happening in Israel is actually an explosion of R&D centers of the multinational companies in the hardware and software companies coming to Israel. Name a company and they have a huge site in Israel of hundreds of engineers. And those companies are not coming here because it's cheaper to employ people here. It's not anymore. So these companies are coming to Israel because we have the best engineers, the best innovators, best entrepreneurs coming from the army. And all of this creates a very innovative ecosystem. So what is happening in the last year, that you have some kind of a convergence between the biotech and the engineering. And this, I think, completes the picture for the advantage of Israel, because if you combine the great innovation in biotech with such good engineers coming with expertise, and let's take ophthalmology as a great example for this, you need great capabilities in optical capabilities, in AI capabilities, engineering capabilities for devices. So all of this, you can really have the best engineers in Israel coming from these multinational companies. They were good trained in the army and then in the large companies. So I think that the human resources in Israel is amazing. And what you can find in the Israeli startups, look at the sizes of the Israeli startups. Most of the companies that presented here, probably they have less than 20 employees, maybe less than 50 employees at the top. Okay, these are sizes that you will not find in other places. The efficiency per employee in the Israeli startup is amazing, and the cost of the development is also much lower. So when you combine great academia with great engineers and great technological spirit and entrepreneurship, and you combine it also with the cost of development in Israel, I think you have a winning combination. And if you, to your additional question about, if you add the government support, and I will say specifically what I mean by government support. And Rob, the Israeli government, as was mentioned here, through the Ministry of Economy, the Innovation Authority, and other tools that they have, they actually support companies in different stages. We are talking about $200 million per year going to the biomed. It doesn't sound like a huge amount compared to the budgets of the companies presented here, but it goes all across the sector. So it comes from the academia through the early stage with the incubator, then they have special programs for the seed company, then they have promotion grants for the institutional investor to invest in later stages. So along the entire life period of a company, you have different grants available. And the Israeli government really encourages companies like Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, Tia to come and invest in Israel, so you can easily leverage the money that you are investing in Israel. So this combination of first-tier top innovation with this government support and the advantages that you have, I think it's a winning combination.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think everybody on the panel agrees that there just seems to be a disproportionate amount of innovation coming out of a small country. And I think that the sheer volume of what we're seeing, at least in the venture space in companies that we know that are progressing throughout their clinical stage of development is really fascinating. And I'm going to just basically say you're right. I think that's the answer. Is it all makes perfect sense, and we don't see any specific end to that trend at all. It's going to hopefully continue to grow, and hopefully at next year's OIS, it'll be a 3-day event with 50 companies presenting, and we'll actually be in Israel. So that'll be much more enjoyable. I want to go back just for a little bit to individual corporate perspective, and obviously without disclosing any proprietary information, perhaps you could discuss a little bit about your specific corporate areas of interest, or if that's not an answerable question, what you think the most important unmet needs are for us to be looking into in ophthalmology. So let's start with Colin and see what Taya thinks.
Sure, so I can share some insight here. So we're an ophthalmology focused company, and it's obvious, but always good to remember that our first goal is to meet any unmet need in the ophthalmic field. So we'll definitely look at everything that doctors consider as being important. That being said, we do indeed have some areas of focus. One of them is glaucoma. And obviously, I'm looking at drug delivery here, as well as new chemical entities and also some surgical options. We are also looking on the retina field. That's clearly a place where we are actually building a pipeline, and we want to expand it. In particular, all the diabetic retinopathy and associated diseases. And we also really think that there is an unmet need in the dry eye space, although developments there are very tricky. So looking, let's say, for clever ways to solve this issue. So in a nutshell, that's, I guess, if there are 3 main areas of interest, it would be those 3.
Great. Prabhu, how about from J&J? Unmet needs, specific areas of interest.
Yeah, so our portfolio is pretty broad. So it covers contact lenses, devices, and pharma. But in a whistle-stop tour, if I look at pharma, it's the common diseases where we still feel there's unmet needs. So AMD, wet and dry, commoner inherited retinal diseases, diabetic retinopathy, diabetic macular edema, and glaucoma. And I think our angle for glaucoma is neuroprotection. We think there's a huge unmet need in neuroprotection. We think the IOP angle is probably well serviced, always more to do, but pretty well serviced. And as a platform modality in pharma, I think we're particularly interested in gene therapy and ways to make that more efficacious, less immunogenic. If I look at our devices business, if I look at it's primarily cataract and refractive surgery rather than vitreoretinal surgery is our portfolio. So we're interested in any anterior segment cataract innovations, intraocular lens designs, optics, novel modalities there. And in contact lenses, the key there is comfort. So any innovation that improves comfort, new optical designs, designs that address presbyopia are totally on strategy. And the biggest unmet need, where I don't think there are good solutions out in the market and will become increasingly important, is myopia. And I think that requires a panacea or a toolkit of approaches. So you'll have contact lenses, you'll have spectacles, you'll have drops, etc. And I think if we held this conference in another 5 to 10 years, I think that will have a far more high profile than it does today currently.
Begonia?
I just couldn't agree more with Prabhu. So we've got a lot of similarities in terms of our interests, which is not surprising. So we kind of break it down in 4 buckets. So we want to continue to be the leader in retina. So we're looking at anything in dry AMD and GA, as well as in diabetic retinopathies or macular edema. And in wet AMD, we're looking at non-anti-VEGF approaches, although we will look at gene therapies as well. The second bucket will also be rare diseases to complement our infrastructure that we've built ex-US for Luxturna. But we're also happy to go earlier, as you saw the acquisition of Videre earlier in the year. The third bucket would be refractive disorders, whether it's surface ocular pain or amblyopia or presbyopia. And specifically myopia, Prabhu, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we are going to face a global epidemic with high myopia. So there is an incredible need to start innovating there in that disease space, and hopefully, Prabhu, as soon as in 5 years' time, we're hoping to see more companies investing in this space. And last but not least, we're looking at digital innovation to, on the one hand, treat patients, like our deal with Amblyotech to treat amblyopia with a digital platform to play games on a tablet that we've partnered with Ubisoft as a gaming company, but also looking at AI or any digital tool to help stratify patients in clinical trials or to help physicians making more informed diagnosis or treatment modalities. So I would say these are the 4 buckets. But as I said before, we want to continue to be the leaders in ophthalmology, and we want to continue to serve the patient. So if you have an idea that it's got a clinical unmet need, please do come to us, because we've got an appetite for anything that will treat things that are not treatable at the moment.
It's amazing. As a clinician, I still spend 50% of my time taking care of patients, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I think I do a reasonably good job, and I think I'm using every available technology out there, especially as a glaucoma specialist. And then I come across these companies that have just unbelievable approaches towards fixing, disease or treating disease, and I'm fascinated by the possibility that the way that patients are treated in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years is going to look completely different. And it's always amazing to think about, how we can help those companies. And Yaakov, I think you're probably in the same boat. You're seeing opportunities, come to you from all different places. Is there something specific that you see that's more exciting or less exciting, or do you think that there's a little bit more focus in one area or another? Anything that you can share with the group about, excitement that's either part of your portfolio or not part of your portfolio, but you're interested in?
Yeah, so unlike the others, we are a public company and all our portfolio is disclosed, so I can speak freely about it. So I think that the current portfolio of BioLight is touching many of the areas mentioned here, from a new chemical entity as targeting uveitis, for drug delivery, targeting the back of the eye with targeting wet AMD and others. We have a new solution for dry eye. We have diagnostics for dry eye. So we have also equipment for the glaucoma surgery room. But I think that looking into the future, and I want to touch on what Bigona just mentioned, looking at the advantages of Israel going forward, and also, to be honest, the capabilities of BioLight to drive innovation until it gets to the market. We don't have the heavy funding that the large corporations have. So we are now focusing on exciting innovation that we believe that in 2 years, we can really bring the product to the market and do a substantial and a great change in the market. As one example only, I think one of the companies that presented here, they are using AI in order to diagnose diabetic retinopathy. And this is just the start. I think that taking the innovation that Israel had in terms of AI, if we will be able to monitor and diagnose the diseases in earlier stages, not necessarily only in the clinics and or the point of care, but at home with sophisticated tools, I think that, I don't know if it will solve myopia, but I think many of the vision impairment causing diseases will be reduced through this. And so we are focusing on this, on the advantages that Israel can bring in engineering and innovation. And we just finished this investment. We are going to do another investment in this area of the sophisticated home monitoring. And probably I see this as one of our growth engines in the next year or two.
Amazing. So I think we all, if you're involved in ophthalmology, there are some pretty common things that I think we all know need to be solved. And I'm firmly of the belief that the technology is out there. I think a lot of the things that we need are out there, and it's just a matter of propagating them and getting them into the right hands. So I'm glad to see that we're mostly all on the same page. I want to spend just a few minutes just going briefly through whether or not any of the strategic partners here have had any disruption or alteration of their plans due to the pandemic. I think it'd be remiss for us not to address whether or not there's been any change in strategy or thought regarding how healthcare should change as a result of what we just experienced over the past year and a half, and are just hopefully beginning to see the end of. So, Colin, anything change at Teo with regard to its perspective? Any plans disrupted? Any thoughts of changing your investment focus based solely on the fact that we just went through, this pandemic and how it affected the world?
So obviously some delays like everyone, I guess, on business and clinical trials, but nothing really very big. On the strategy side, I think the one thing that it accelerated our will to go on the digital area. That's something that has been on the radar for some time, and we made a couple of investments already in the past. But if one thing's changed, I think it's on that front.
Great.
Accelerating our effort on that direction.
Yeah, Begonia, how about you? Novartis thinking anything more or differently, change its perspective at all?
No, I mean, from a strategic perspective and what we're sourcing BD now, there's been no change whatsoever. We continue en route. And I must admit, during the pandemic, I found partnerships easy to start, to remain in the partnership. And I think technology has worked extremely well. And I didn't think I would see this before, but I saw a lot of flexibility from legal departments around the world to sign up to DocuSign. So I've been signing contracts digitally, which is something that we never did before, right? So I think that's brought a positive stamp to it. In terms of how it's affected us, I mean, in the whole wet AMD treatment, we saw across the industry a huge decrease in sales because patients couldn't get to the clinics. And that was worrying. So we're thinking about strategies of, if another pandemic hits, how can we get to those patients? And obviously, we did see an impact on clinical trials recruitment, like you would see in any other company. But we've taken a lot of positives, and the message that I want to give today is that our BD&L strategy hasn't changed. It continues to be strong, and we aim to, as Prabhu, to have 50% of our portfolio sourced from the outside.
Yeah, that's great. Prabhu, how about for J&J?
Yeah, so let me divide that into two things. One is, what were the impacts? And two is, has our strategy changed? And I'll start with the impacts. And I think we've alluded to a lot of this already. I think many of our research collaborations have been delayed quite transparently. It's not just recruitment, it's actually even getting people into the relevant labs, getting the samples. If one bit of the supply chain gets delayed, it has a knock-on effect. So I think that has made that slower. I think the negotiation and transaction piece is equally fast. It's more on if you're in a prolonged relationship and you're actually developing new IP, that has definitely been delayed. I think strategically, there have been some shifts, and I think it's an acceleration in priorities. I think digital has certainly moved up our importance radar. I think remote monitoring, remote treatment, remote telerefraction, anything that avoids a patient having to come in face-to-face to an ophthalmologist or an optician, I think has probably taken on greater relevance internally, because we think there will be a permanent change in attitudes as a result of COVID. And from an investor's perspective, unfortunately, we've seen a number of syndicates fall apart. They're keeping capital dry for their existing portfolio companies rather than making new investments. And that's an opportunity in some ways, because there are more deals to be done in theory. But it's been very, very challenging for a lot of these companies who thought that they had a near-term path to funding, and unfortunately the rug's been pulled away from them. So it's been a challenging time, I think, for our partners and for us.
Yeah, Jakob, you obviously will go next as per the current system, but we've seen a significant increase in the number of companies presenting to us with digital health, remote diagnosis, and monitoring opportunities. The number of AI companies is exploded as algorithms are maturing and people are looking for earlier funding. I was fearful initially that the shift towards remote management and diagnosis, or at least the desire to have that, would wane as the pandemic dissipated to some degree. But I agree with you, probably. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think that permanently attitudes have changed, and I think that there's going to be a need to figure out how to do things without patients coming in. Not only is that a benefit from safety, but there's going to be obvious cost savings to health systems around the world if we can figure out how to do it correctly. So, Yaakov, you've seen that also. I'm sure these companies are coming out of everywhere.
Yeah, so in Israel, actually, we experienced an interesting period. We were the first to get finished with the COVID, so we are totally back to business. We are the most vaccinated nation in the world now. But people sometimes forget that we went through 4 rounds of elections, and maybe tonight we will have a government, still not known. We had a mini war in Gaza. And regardless of this, I think that the innovation in Israel was just expanding dramatically. Many of the companies that were presented here in the OIS actually raised a lot of money during the pandemic. And also we in BioLight, we experienced an amazing time, that a lot of opportunities. I agree with Begonia that it's easy to maintain relationship during the pandemic. I think it's a little bit more complicated to establish new relationship when you don't know your partner and you never met him in person. But in terms of the technologies, obviously there was a shift toward this home monitoring, diagnostics, and the remote monitoring. But we have to be cautious with this. Not every AI company is doing what it should do, and we have to be very cautious about this investment and to make sure that because of this remote monitoring and home monitoring, we don't give up on the quality of the diagnosis and the monitoring. So I think this is an important message that we should all consider.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's an interesting time to have witnessed this from the perspective of being both a clinician and an investor, and I think that it's exciting to know that, as I said before, that these technologies exist, many of which are coming from Israel, and that our strategic partners are actively looking for the right ones. So I wish we had more time. There's so many more things to discuss, but unfortunately, I think we'll probably stop here. I'd like to thank all of you for giving us some insight into your perspectives on not only Israel as an opportunity for investment, but also about the technology that you're investing in and the direction of your companies. I think it's important for the people who will listen to this presentation and hopefully come to Israel next year to be with us live, will realize that there's significant value in interacting with all of you early and having themselves feel comfortable enough to show up with whatever data they have and get some guidance, and that you'll be open and help them or be quick with the response. And I think that's going to be very much appreciated. So Begonia Carreño from Novartis, Colin Franco, TEA, Yaakov Michelin from BioLight, and Prabhu Velasamy from J&J. Thank you for your time. On behalf of OIS Innovation Showcase in Israel, we appreciate the time that you spent with us, and we're looking forward to seeing you next year in Israel once again. So thank you all.
Thank you all for guiding us and doing this. Thank you.
We'll see you next year, Rob and colleagues. Looking forward.
Hopefully face to face.
Yes.
In person. That's a promise.